Brian, whenever you are ready.
Okay. I would like to officially call to order the Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission, and pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This public meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation, and no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. But the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom video communications. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. And as always, by tradition, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Laura Stevenson.
William Payne.
And Rebecca Longwell.
Okay.
Very quickly, some guidelines for participants. If you have not done so already, please change your display name to your first and last legal name for record-keeping purposes. You are able to utilize the chat or raised hand function in order to address the board once the chair opens the hearing item to public comment. Please remain on mute until you have been addressed by the board chair or myself identifying that you would like to speak, and then the board chair will just notice that you would like to provide a comment. But again, please change your display name to your first and last name. We would appreciate it, and I will hand it back over to our chair. And our first item actually is a presentation regarding the Forest Legacy Program by Al Futterman of the Nashua River Watershed Association. And he will be providing a brief presentation on this program that actually our Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council has been taking on. Obviously, Al is the wonderful coordinator, putting in great effort into it as we work through this large project, which he will now present. So I will unmute you, Al. I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thanks for this time to briefly share with you what we're up to and what we hope to accomplish before we submit this Forest Legacy Grant in July. So it is NSN, Nashua, Squannacook, Nissitissit. Those were the three rivers that were just a couple of years ago to the month designated as wild and scenic. And Bolton is one of the 11 towns that are part of this designation. So we thought it was a good opportunity to seize upon this federal land conservation grant opportunity. Next slide. What you'll see here is that the U.S. Forest Service is the administrator for this nationwide program, but it's administered at the state level in Massachusetts by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR. So the focus obviously is on forests, just as if it were, say, a farm legacy conservation project. We would be looking for protecting our food security into the future. Here, the Forest Service is looking to protect forest stands so that we have all the good fiber and other products that forests deliver into the future, so they won't be developed. This also points out that there's two paths forward for a landowner. You could do an outright fee simple sale, fee purchase. You're no longer the landowner, you're selling it all. Or you could do a conservation restriction. Everywhere else in the country, it's known as a conservation easement. Here, it's a CR. Next slide. You do have to be in a forest legacy area, but we're there. So also notes that the program's been going on for 30 years nationwide. In Massachusetts, it's protected about 16,000 acres, 100 properties. And I think nationwide, it's in the millions of acres that they've protected through Forest Legacy. Next. Thank you. And here are some of those 100 projects scattered around the area. Next slide. This is not our project. I can't be sharing our draft map with you because it's confidential. But here's an example of a project that was completed just a few years ago, successfully protected 3,000 acres, almost 30 landowners. So it's landscape scale, and this is very much what ours will look like. Right now, we're at about 23 different landowners and about 2,000 acres, and it may settle out right about there. We're pretty close to wrapping it up. These are some important points. So the feds pay 75%. We have to come up with 25% cost share. And the property that I will be presenting to you specifically is going to help in that column, I believe. We touched on fee or CR. The properties that are involved must be at least 75% forested, so no large amounts of water, open water, or fields. That's not what this is about. This is about forested land. And then there's a bunch of due diligence we have to complete as we move forward. Next slide. It may be the last slide. No, we'll submit again in July to DCR. Lindsay is the Forest Legacy Coordinator in Massachusetts. There's only 3 criteria that the project, the individual tracks and the project as a whole are ranked and scored on. Importance refers to the natural resource values of the properties, but also their cultural, scenic, water quality impacts, etc. Threat of conversion is really everywhere. Any property that isn't already protected is threatened. And then it refers to strategic importance. And that is, for example, is it called out in your town's open space plan? Is there a regional open space plan that refers to this area? Is it in a corridor, for example, for wildlife? That sort of thing is meant by strategic. We only need 2 items to complete the application. We need all the landowners to agree to participate in a letter, and we need the entity that's going to hold the restriction or the fee to also give a letter. And I should have mentioned quite earlier, but that is why I'm presenting to you tonight, because the properties that we hope to include in Bolton would be, I hope, held, the interests would be held by the Bolton Concom. It must be a governmental entity. So if it's not the town, it would have to be the state. And really there isn't much, if any, interest by either Mass Wildlife or DCR. So it sort of falls back onto the town. And that concludes it. The last slide just is my contact information and Lindsay's contact information. So assuming that you have this in your packets, we could stop screen sharing and I could take any questions. I would note that the project itself is driven by the Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council. So while that is a it doesn't have 501c3 status, thus it's the National River Watershed Association that's the fiscal agent. And of course, Rebecca and Rona Balco are Bolton's representatives to Wild and Scenic Stewardship Council.
All right, thank you, Al. I do appreciate you presenting that and the work you guys have been doing.
Thank you.
Well, it's a public meeting, so we can say publicly, I don't think we'd have any problem holding conservation restrictions. It's something we've done in the past. I'm sure it's something we'd be willing to do on any of these properties. I don't think I have any initial questions. I'll open up to the rest of the commission. I'm just curious, are there steps we can be doing now to make us more attractive when the grant process opens up or as we go through it. Other things we should have in place, like our open space and rec plan, anything up to date or any steps we can take now that could help.
No.
Okay.
Eventually, we will certainly ask for a letter of support for that July submission. So while I'm not at liberty to discuss specific properties, if and when we get to that point, I'll come back in executive session and I'll name it. But because it's an institution, I will share with you that New England Power National Grid they've already signed a letter of participation. What we haven't finalized is what kind of a bargain sale they're willing to do. We're assuming that it's going to be at least the required 25%, but it very well may be more than that, in which case it could cover the required cost share for another private landowner in Bolton.
Oh, well,
Yeah, and so that was 53 acres, by the way, in that New England Power has, very strategically positioned.
that's excellent. Do any other members of the commission have questions at this point for Al?
Great, that was the intent of speaking with you, is to get a general feel, and I'm very happy to hear that it seems to be green light on your part.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we
Go
do
ahead.
have a question from a resident, if you would like to allow for public comment.
I absolutely would, and I apologize for not bringing that up earlier. But yes, if you could please put them through.
Sure. Gordon and Betsy are here. I think I've just unmuted you. There you go.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll ask the question because I spoke to Al on the phone about 2 weeks ago, I think, about the land that we've just purchased on Wattaquadock Hill. And I would like to clarify whether, I think Al said that you're going to be reapplying next year in 2022. And I wanted to sort of understand that, because it sounded like you have a certain amount of land that you're using this year, and then you're going to build another pile of land, if you want to, for want of a better word, next year. Did I get that right?
Very much so. In fact, when Brian asked his last question and what could be done, I was going to mention we could be looking forward now to next year when we might submit a phase 2. Of course, it's contingent on phase 1 being successful, that
Yeah.
the grant is awarded. Otherwise, there's no phase 2. And then the other contingency is because we need it to be a very large project, 1,000 acres plus.
Yeah.
We have that now, but it's not guaranteed that there'd be enough landowners next year to reach that threshold.
Yeah, we had another question actually.
Please.
We're in, if we look at the land we bought, it includes a substantial piece of North Brook, which probably you know, runs down Wattaquadock towards Clinton, actually Berlin to be more precise.
Mhm.
Actually, if you follow North Brook, it does not go into the Nashua River, it goes into the Assabet River.
Not a
Eventually.
problem.
Okay,
No,
okay.
no,
Yeah, if I'm anticipating your question, that's fine. We're including anywhere in town.
okay,
Okay,
Very
it's
good.
just that with the name of the organization being the Nashua River Watershed Association, we wondered whether it was limited to that.
No.
Okay, great.
great. Thank you, that was our question.
Pleasure.
Rebecca, is there anyone else here from the public looking for a question?
I don't see any other questions, and I would like to thank Al for coming and presenting. It's a very large project. There's a lot of moving parts. He's been doing a great job coordinating everything. And it's been interesting as well, in particular with the question that Betsy and Gordon just asked, and finding out exactly where the project area can be or is or could be allocated to. So it's been interesting, and I certainly hope it's successful, but time will tell with that. So
Yes.
thank you.
Well, I hope to be back quite soon as we have more definitive stuff to share. And looks like we are right on time. So I'll say goodbye and let you continue.
Thank
Thanks
you,
a lot.
All
Al.
right,
Have a good night.
thank you.
You as well.
Okay. Rebecca, you ready to continue?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen again, if you bear with me one moment.
Go ahead.
Oop. Okay.
Okay.
So we have a request for certificate of compliance for 1141 Main Street. It was a single family home and restoration area. The restoration area had been completed actually prior to my time here. Unfortunately, the property owner had some difficulties with the contractor, which left the septic area unfinished. So they were issued an emergency permit to allow the work for the septic to continue. They have since submitted the information for their certificate of compliance, and now they're requesting to formally close out on the property.
Okay. Have you had a chance to tour the property or
I have.
do
And
you
I'm,
have any, as I
I
said,
was
do
gonna
you
say-
do you have any concerns or
I
have they
don't,
met their conditions?
I don't, the lawn has been stabilized within the limit of work associated with the area with the septic. There's a crossing here as well that was installed, and that's still within compliance. The plantings had been completed. You can still see where some of the plantings were. It is grown in a little bit, but it wasn't an area to be landscaped, just maintaining it related to the invasive species. But it's a replication, or excuse me, a remediation area, not to be continuously landscaped.
Gotcha.
That's all I have.
Okay. Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments regarding this COC request? Right. Rebecca, are there any members of the public here tonight to comment on this request for a certificate of compliance?
I see no members present, but I would suggest if the commission is thinking to vote to issue a certificate of compliance, I would suggest including language in the vote stating any ongoing conditions existing within the order of conditions. Because I believe there are two in particular.
Right, so there's two ongoing conditions that are currently listed in the order, well,
Yeah.
that the order conditions say will be ongoing conditions upon completion.
Yep.
Right, and it's probably the main maintenance of that area.
Yes,
And do you remember what the other?
I don't. And that's
Um,
why I think it's fine just to say with the conditions already listed, because it actually states right in line with those, what they are.
Yep.
And they can carry over.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for 1141 Main Street with the following ongoing conditions, that any ongoing conditions listed in the original order of conditions be carried over and maintained as ongoing conditions moving forward. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, we'll start with Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
We're ahead of time for Memorial Field. Did people have a chance to look through the minutes from April 6th? And if so, were there any questions on the minutes from April 6th or recommended changes, typos, anything of concern? All right. Hearing none, going to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our April 6th, 2021 meeting as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do I hear a second for that?
I second.
All right, all those in favor, Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Are there any other updates you think you can hit for 5 to 10 minutes?
Sure, I'm just gonna pull up the agenda. Well, one of the updates is we have officially closed on the Taggart parcel. And today we did have a very small ribbon cutting ceremony with the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Senator Cronin was present, a representative from State Representative Hogan's office was also present, along with our chair, the grant administrator, and the Division of Conservation Services lead as well. It was very small for not only social distancing reasons, but also we were working with the secretary's schedule. So it was quite a short time frame in the way we would be able to have it organized. It went well, and we did walk the property a little bit with the senator, and Brian was also present as well. Sorry, someone just entered. And we will be moving forward with that. We also, related to that property, have recently received news that we received a grant for the trail that we promised would connect the existing Forbush Conservation Area, which is also adjacent to Forest Mill Fields, to the Taggart parcel. And that grant actually allows us to hire a high school or college student. So I'm working with Human Resources right now to create an announcement for that so that we can then collect applications and then make a decision in a timely manner. And that grant was awarded to us by the Nashua River Watershed Association through their Small Communities Grant. And this is the first round that the first year that they're offering that grant. So we were the only project that was actually fully funded. So that's exciting. And that trail project will actually be including some information about the recently designated Wild and Scenic River, because it's a tributary to that area, and highlight some of that information for educational purposes, but also the history of the property itself. Another update we have is on, where am I here? Where our volunteer land steward position is still open. Maybe we'll call the intern that for the trail project, I'm not sure. And then also we did an invasive species removal led by our TerraCorps member, Jonathan Harstick. And we will be having a garlic mustard pull led by one of our Trails Committee members in the near future. Along with, I will be working on baseline survey work for the land grant so that we can formally close that out. And then right now we are having the townwide cleanup, which we're encouraging individuals to clean up out front of the conservation properties, but also the conservation properties themselves. And I know I shared with Emily, I actually created a link to an app called Literati, which was advertised through Nature Groupie, which is where we're trying, it's a website based out of New Hampshire, but as part of the Suasco SISMA group, we are trying to encourage posting events there so that we get a larger volunteer basis throughout not only the town, but maybe some individuals from other towns who want to assist in properties that they use. And using this Literati app, it basically contributes to a worldwide cleanup week data collection. So what type of pollution or litter rather, and then how many pieces, and our challenge is for an individual to pick up 1,000 pieces. So if everyone does that, I think our town will be clean. You would think, but there's always micro pieces as well. I don't know if that brings us up to the time or not. Not yet.
We are close, yeah.
Okay. Emily, do you have any Earth Day updates?
I do not have any updates from our last meeting, but I did share the Literati link with Bolton Local, and I shared it on our community page, and I believe
Nice.
the Bolton Mothers group. Is that to be used for conservation areas only, or is
No.
that for any cleanup in the town?
It can be any cleanup in the town. I obviously set it up with the trails in mind because that's my jurisdiction, but it can certainly be used, I would think, for anywhere in town. And this is our first time using it. Again, it was through Nature Groupie, so it's not that we're sponsoring any specific app in particular, but it was just something fun and hopefully will engage varying ages of the community. The other thing actually I did want to touch upon is at Bower Springs, we did receive a request from the Bolton Trails Committee to use rebar to hold the down logs in place to line the trail to discourage people from walking along the edge of the pond in specific areas. Because we lined almost, we lined half of the pond, and whether it be beavers or individuals who didn't understand the signage that was out there to discourage them from moving it, they were all moved. So the Trails Committee is feeling that if they use rebar to hold it in place, it will be less likely to be removed from the property or removed from its location. So I'm not sure how the commission feels about that.
It's a good question. I'm just sad people were removing it or moving it.
Yeah.
I just know we have so much erosion going on around that pond. I hate to see the rebar used, but I'm not sure there is a better option at this point, or just letting it naturally decay. I mean, it just seems to be sloughing off pretty bad, especially in some of those areas. Does any other commission members have a strong feeling about this one way or the other?
I agree with you, Brian. It's unfortunate that we might have to resort to rebar, but I think it's a better alternative than the erosion.
Rebecca, I mean, have you seen better solutions that are actually doable / affordable?
What I have seen is, so the issue is, I also am on the same thought as Emily and yourself regarding the use of rebar within that proximity to the pond, because it's not something natural. It may over time degrade and maybe cause or impact the pond in some way. However, the other item I could see is to basically tow in, and I'm using that generally, but basically you dig a small trench, lay the log in, and then put the soil along it. But that is more soil disturbance. And again, it's not something permanent. And it's unfortunate that we can't communicate to the public that this is necessary and it's a big concern. And if we don't do something like this to reduce what is impacting the edges of the pond, either it's going to erode to the point where that earthen dam will no longer be there, or we'll have to close off that trail, and no one wants that. I certainly don't, the public doesn't. That's one of our most highly trafficked properties that are enjoyed by many different user groups. So I don't know if it's not using rebar and just really pushing that public education piece, or using the rebar in a specific area to test it out for a short period of time, and then if it works, great, and we use it from then on. But that's where I am in terms of my thought process, but I haven't heard of someone using that in close proximity to a pond, but I also, the best solution would be just to line it, use the surface material like we did, but for some reason people are moving it. And that's where the issue lies. And we don't have someone there 24/7 to police people from removing it.
Would using like a wattle roll instead of the logs, that way they just naturalize in there, creating a berm on its own. The rebar, my only concern is the log eventually is going to rot, and then you
Right.
have the rebar is not. And now you have this dangerous spike that's there where the wattle roll would just create a natural berm over time. Things would just grow over it. Just a thought, I don't know.
That's actually, Lori, a really good point that I hadn't thought about. I mean, I did obviously think about the degrading of the log as well, but regarding the wattle, that's a really good thought, and I can certainly look into that and suggest that. Because you're right, it creates sort of a growing substrate as well, if you use more of like a compost sock wattle versus a straw wattle.
Right.
Yeah.
It may be something on that nature. It's a little bit more obvious to people that it's there for a reason, as opposed to a log that, oh, you just don't want me to go there, whatever.
Right. That's true. Okay. So is that what the commission would prefer?
I think so. If you'd be
Okay.
willing to explore that and see its feasibility, I
Yep.
think that would be the next thing to test and see if that would work. It would allow us to avoid the rebar.
No problem. Okay, thank you for that suggestion. I didn't even think of that.
It brings us right up to 7:30. So without further delay, if you are ready. Okay,
I am. Let me,
all right.
can everyone see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
All right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue a request for determination of applicability under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, for a proposed operation and maintenance plan by Parks and Recreation for Memorial Field. I think we're officially open. Okay, so Rebecca, in front of us, this is the most up-to-date, right? Are we O&M plan?
yes. Yep.
All right.
We have one tie-in that I actually had suggested, and they did submit the information by the deadline, so before noon last Thursday. Bolton Youth Baseball, and it has been approved by Parks and Rec, would like to include a batting alley or batting cage, and I apologize if I'm not using the right terminology, to replace what was existing, and it's slightly wider. And I can pull up that file in a moment, but I think if we address this first, then I can add that in, but they're looking to include that within this determination as well. And I had suggested to them to do so because they could meet the deadline, but also it is directly related to this, and it's replacing infrastructure that was existing versus having them wait and file a new
Do a new.
determination.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is this the type of document that we would want to entertain any amendments to at this time, or is that not permitted to try to enhance what we've offered? We've looked at what we submitted on April 14th and have some additional suggestions if you want to discuss them.
We would absolutely love to hear them, Ed.
All right.
And we should be able to include them as amendments if people are amenable.
All right. I have actually sent you an email with the updated amendments dated April 15th. and I can voice them so that we can see the document on your screen and just add some statements for consideration.
If you could, Ann.
All right. Under the seed and fertilizer, we could suggest that organic methods should be used when practicable. Prior to the fertilizer application each season, soil tests could be performed to identify the soil needs and minimize unnecessary application of chemicals. Right now, the contractor is hired to simply come in on a scheduled basis with apparently no real regard for the condition of the field. And so if soil tests were done, and it's unclear that they are, we've never received a report of them ourselves, it might help to understand what the actual needs are. It may well be unnecessary to do that. The grass at the moment looks in fairly good condition. And so instead of a blanket application, soil testing might help us to better assess the true need as opposed to just a field-wide blanket fertilization with other materials. So that's a suggestion under seed and fertilizer. Again, organic methods to be used and soil testing to be done prior to any blanket application by the contractor. Under weed control, we could add that if weeds are hand pulled, the bare areas could be loamed and seeded to prevent further weed growth. And so it's been suggested to try to do some hand weeding. There's, I'm sure, enough players that the kids could be put to work and perhaps adult volunteers. And so instead of leaving a bare hole, at least seed the area and hope for the best that the weed doesn't come back. The final sentence under weed control would be that herbicides should be spot applied and not blanketly applied the way they are today. And so we could see how herbicides could be spot applied. I don't know if the contractor is willing to do that, but certainly I think, you know, we could find some approach. I'm sure they'd like to make money, and maybe they do that kind of service. So we could see if that's a better way to approach things like herbicides. Grub control, one suggestion that was very valuable was to truly see if there's a problem. And again, the application of things like, you know, pesticides are really going again according to a sort of a schedule and a formula, and it's unclear to us that true testing is being done to find out what the problems, if there's an actual problem. And so there's a method of evaluating a square foot of soil and seeing if grubs are present, and if perhaps something like 5 or more are present, then we could consider having some type of grub control applied. Again, perhaps with the commission's permission, and it could be done, I suppose, on a special request basis. But I guess it's something of a standard test to look at a square foot of soil and evaluate that the grubs are going to be there. Apparently, grubs can actually turn into Japanese beetles. That may well be what the worm is going to metamorphize into. So that was just another suggestion. And let me see here. So we might, by doing that, we might reduce the amount of chemicals being applied to the field, again, unnecessarily. Finally, one thing that's been noted is irrigation. It does seem to be very effective at the moment, both at Forbush Field and Memorial Field. We don't have it at Town Common, and it certainly seems to show. One of the problems is timing irrigation. Done in the middle of the day, significant evaporation occurs. So it appears that that's what's actually happening, that the irrigation is being done in the middle of the day. And if we can get the timing system, I think located in I might be in the Memorial House, I'm not sure, that's a detail. See if that can be done without, strong sunlight to make the irrigation more effective and not evaporate at the loss that we're seeing today. So we could find out how the sprinkler system works and see if that could be adjusted. But it has been noted that it's happening during the day, and we're probably losing a lot of water that way. this came from a discussion with one of the town employees who is familiar with landscaping methods and said he didn't understand why this was being done in the afternoons like this with fairly strong sunlight. So those are just some suggestions that we might add as amendments, and I have sent you an email to that effect to your attention, Brian, personally.
Brian, would you like me to would you like to finish addressing this, or do you want me to bring up the other item as well so that the commission can vote on them both at the same time?
Why don't you bring up the other item first, and then we can kind of go, so if people have comments on either or both, they can get them out.
So here is the information about, excuse me, it's a hitting tunnel, not a batting cage. And it will be located at the Bolton Capitol Diamond at Memorial Field. This is to the, what do you think about this? To the north of the field they're referring to. So I'll show you when we get back to the other map, where it is on the larger property map. But it's here, if you can see my mouse. These are the posts. Here's your wood line. I'm not sure if anyone from Bolton Youth Baseball is here, or if Parks and Rec wants to just summarize this for the commission.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Mike Gore from Bolton Youth Baseball and Softball.
Hi, Michael.
So hopefully you guys have had a chance to look through the document. I'm, here to answer any questions you might have about it. Essentially, the existing tunnel structure, the posts on it were no longer safe, and so we took those down at the end of last year. And as we went through options for replacing it, we were going to look at a like for like, replacing it with the same footprint. But as we were doing this and looking at our finances, we wanted to make essentially a double cage. And the big reason for that is so we had a place for pitchers to warm up in between games. If you've ever been to a game there's usually a lot of people milling around in between the batting cage and the field. And so throwing in that area is kind of tricky to do. So we basically want to bring the footprint of the cage in towards the Bolton Capitol Field, the fenced in field. So the footprint of the existing batting cage will stay as it is, and then just widen out towards the field.
So the location of this is actually right here. Here's the Capitol Field, Michael, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And then the tunnel was here previously.
Exactly.
And so they're looking to replace it and then move towards the field as well.
Yep. So it'll widen towards the field. It won't go any further in towards the wetland, going towards the schools.
Right. Does the commission have any questions about that item?
I don't know if, I mean, that was my big question is we're moving from the existing footprint in towards the existing field, not back out towards. And it would be, what is it, 12 posts? It's basically you just set the post and string netting between them.
It's 10 posts, 5 on each side.
Okay.
Yeah. And so those will be
5 down the middle?
No, it's 5 on each end. So it's a separate, if you saw the old cage, it had posts going down every so many feet. The posts in the middle of it kind of provide a ricochet point if you hit balls off of it. This one also gives us this kind of winch system for installing the nets. It's with the old system, you kind of had to drape the net over the post, which kind of meant someone was, you know, standing up on a ladder trying to heave this heavy net over them. And so this new design that we found from this company out of Braintree, you know, is a winch system that lets you stand on one end and just kind of crank down a winch to secure the net. So it's a lot safer for putting it up.
Okay. I don't have additional questions on this right now. Other members of the commission have questions, thoughts, or feelings on this? This part of the project, at least, the hitting tunnel? All right. Any of the members of the public here tonight to comment on the hitting tunnel?
I see none.
All right. Well, I'd like to get your thoughts, Rebecca, but also Ed, while we have you here, does Parks and Rec have any strong thoughts or feelings?
Not a bit. Came up the other night and everyone thinks it's a nice enhancement. I did caution though, the folks in baseball that a possible RDA might be required if it turned out to be in a wetland zone. So I did alert them of that they would, I'd want them to contact you, and this meeting is obviously appropriate for that.
And thank you, Ed, for doing that.
You bet.
I actually spoke with Michael at length, and I appreciate him calling as well, talking about where the proposed area would be, how it would be expanded towards the field, not closer to and encroaching into the resource area, where it is replacing the footprint and then adding to, again, away from the resource area. I'm comfortable with it. There is some minor grading that's going to take place and some seeding, from my understanding. Just as we looked at the first image of what's existing, it's just because the area when it's used, the vegetation gets removed. And they are also going to be working on some cleanup as well around the perimeter of the fields, which I see as appropriate. So all of those things tied into the project, I think it's acceptable. As Brian noted, it's really just the anchoring poles, I'll term it that way, that are the disturbance. I'm not concerned about the netting. And in that sense, it's almost a temporary structure aside from the poles themselves. And I think as long as at the end of the season, they are ensuring that that area is properly stabilized and seeded to ensure that it's growing in and it's not going to be remaining degraded prior to the next season and going over the winter, I think that would be acceptable.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't have any other questions. I think we'd be fine with it as it's proposed right now. Do other commission members have questions, thoughts, comments about any of the proposed amendments that Ed had discussed regarding the operation and maintenance plan we're now looking at before us?
Brian, I'd like to just address the commission with regard to the O&M plan.
Please.
And I just want to be completely transparent and say that I started kind of having informal conversations with Ed about maintenance at the fields, probably when we first started talking about this, before it became a formal OOC process. And as a new member of Bolton Local, but also as a community member, I have been doing some research on field maintenance and talking to DPW and trying to find ways that we can improve the maintenance process and use less chemicals. So I just want to ask the commission if they would prefer that I recuse myself from any votes on the O&M manuals. This one and anything in the future. I think we'll be seeing one for the town common. So I just wanted to give the commission members that opportunity to decide if it's, if it's something that I should recuse myself from prior to the vote.
Yes, to say
and I no hard feelings either way. So I wanted to be transparent and give you that opportunity. So
I do not know where legally or ethically we need to fall down on that or should fall down on that. I think what I would suggest is, because we don't know, I honestly don't believe you've done anything wrong. But if you want to recuse yourself, we still have a quorum of votes, right? We can still pass or not pass. And that way we just don't run into any questions down the line.
What she could also do is you can also abstain, which makes you and keeps you part of the conversation. That's another opportunity for the commission. Certainly stating any potential perceived conflict is helpful for the record, so I appreciate you doing so, Emily. But Mr. Chair, you also have the opportunity to suggest that she abstain versus voting yay or nay versus recusing where there would be a clear conflict in that instance, just to allow you another opportunity.
Yeah, and it's probably the best opportunity to best course, because it, like you said, it will allow Emily to continue being part of the conversation, because she's already put in enough volunteer hours on this, and actually, can speak eloquently upon what's actually here. So I'd hate to lose her as part of the conversation, but yeah, you may want to just do that, Emily, when it comes time for us to vote, just to abstain. You've already publicly disclosed why you would be abstaining. I don't think we have any issue. At least I don't have an issue.
I think that makes sense. And I would like to continue working with Parks and Rec on a, community level. So if that is okay with the commission, that I can continue to do that, but I will abstain from voting on future OOCs or COCs.
I appreciate that. We have no competence in this area, and help from someone who has the training is extremely valuable to us. Parks and Rec has never been involved, in my experience, with this type of field maintenance. If it has, it's been lost, I think, in terms of institutional knowledge. And so this has been quite a shock to us to be involved in this vegetation management planning. So any help has been extremely valuable to us.
All right. So that all said and out there, Emily, did you want to comment on some of those proposed amendments?
I stand behind those proposed amendments. Those came from conversations that Ed and I have had. And I talked to Eddie. I ran into Eddie at the baseball field. He's the one who talked to me about the irrigation system. So I can fully support those amendments. And I think they're all great additions.
Other commission members have strong feelings or initial thoughts on those amendments, or any of parts of the OOM in front of you? Okay. Rebecca, any members of the public here that want to comment on this part of our discussion this evening?
I just want to say that I think it's going to be a very hard time getting kids to volunteer picking weeds. I know my kids won't pick weeds as much as I try. And I don't know about volunteers. I know baseball and like soccer or any other has a hard time finding volunteers. So another thing for them to do. The other thing I know I talked to Pete, he's not here, but he said the sprinkler system isn't and shouldn't be going off in the afternoon. As far as he knows, it's supposed to be at 12 midnight. But I talked to DPW today and he didn't know. He didn't give me an answer. He's going to get back to me, give me an answer. But if it's going on in the middle of the afternoon, it could have been because of we lost electricity or something like that. But it's not supposed to be going off in the afternoon. That's not when baseball wants it to go off. That doesn't help them either. So I don't know where the disconnect with that is, but I'll see what DPW says when they answer me. He was looking into it.
Lisa, that was Eddie had told me when I was at the field last week. Eddie had told me that it would go off in the afternoons. I don't remember recently if it had, but I remember when my kids were little, we'd be at the playground and they loved running through the sprinklers. So at one point it went off in the afternoon, maybe not recently. The irrigation section in the O&M just requests that it go off either after sunset or before sunrise. It does not specify a time. And the weed section is just an effort to have them not spray the entire field. There were two options to hand pull or spot apply herbicide outside of the wetland resource area. There are no herbicides allowed in the wetland resource area. When I was there last week, I kid you not, I saw one example or one occurrence of crabgrass that could be hand pulled very easily. I didn't see any other weeds. I walked the entire field. So that note was made with that in mind. I don't think weeds are a big issue there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not now. I don't know about later on. I know my grass has a lot of it, but I'm not sure. I can't say. We haven't played baseball in a couple of years, so but it does look nice. The field does look nice.
I think it says too, they should be spot applied when possible. So that still leaves the door open.
Yeah, yeah.
Reasonable field maintenance.
And I think on the data sheets, whether they say something different or not, it says spot applied. Whether they did or not, I don't know.
They didn't. I talked to Gatsby. They spray the whole field with they spray the entire field, and there's 4 different herbicides that they use, or there's 4 treatments for different, targets. So that was kind of our concern.
Okay.
I have if the time is right.
Yes, Rebecca, you're on mute, by the way.
Yep, you saw what I was trying to say though, so that's fine.
Yeah. Go ahead, if you can introduce yourself and please ask your question.
Yeah,
Or your
hi.
comment.
Hi, Vince LaRosa. I'm part of Bolton Youth Baseball and Softball. Pete is not able to make it tonight. So a couple things. Like, first of all, I do want to clarify what Lisa said is absolutely correct. No one at Bolton Youth Baseball and Softball wants irrigation going off that time. So completely in agreement, Ed, with that recommendation. Makes a ton of sense, and love to work with you on that, making sure that does. Not sure why that happened, but making sure it doesn't happen in the future for sure. Couple of questions, couple of comments. So as far as the soil test being performed, a couple of questions there. Who would pay for that?
That would not be something that's addressed during this meeting. That would be something you'd have to discuss separately with Parks and Recreation, as they're the managers of the property. And that is not under the jurisdiction of the commission.
Okay. And just because these are recommendations being made, I'm sure that the background has been, fully vetted. How long does it typically take for a soil test to be requested, applied, and then the information comes back and say, oh, you have 6 grubs, we can treat this now, and then it actually gets applied? I'm just curious what that time frame would look like.
Sure. So that would be a question you'd have to ask the contracted party who does the soil testing. It varies. For samples, it can be a couple days, it can be a week. It all depends on what lab they're using, or if they have someone in the house that they use.
Got it. Okay. And then I guess last question, when was the last time, just as a point of reference, that the town common was fertilized?
Was what?
Fertilized. Any fertilizer was put down?
I don't know. And again, that's more of a question for Parks and Rec that's under their jurisdiction. The part of the operation maintenance plan, we will be discussing town common at some point in the near future, as you're noticing with all of the Parks and Recreation properties, because they are jurisdictional and they require either a closeout with a COC, or in this case, a new request for determination of applicability to be issued to be brought into compliance. So I would encourage you, as far as the commission's jurisdiction, to keep an eye on the agendas coming up to see when that public hearing item will be. Otherwise, I'm sure you could contact Lisa at Town Hall, and she may be able to at least guide you in the right direction if she has that information.
No, fair enough. The only reason I ask is just for a point of reference. I was up there today
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, it doesn't look great. There's a lot, I mean, I took some pictures and I sent them over to Parks and Rec just as point of reference, not just the weeds, but really the unstable, like the way the grass is unstable. And I would hate to see, I mean, that's not an official ball field, right? I would hate to see the ball fields where a ball rolling, you know, matters and a kid taking a one off the face because it hits a bump. I mean, it has become very bumpy. It's
Yep.
not, it looks very different than it did last year. So to Emily's point, I know, you know, Gatsby Grounds had sent an email to you, Rebecca, on July 28th last year saying we'll be out tomorrow. So
Yep.
they had actually, I think there was some miscommunication. They had sprayed several times before on the 28th, you sent them that email and they decided, you know what, we're going to stop spraying. So there isn't a ton of vegetation that comes up now that would be effective because of what happened this year. So my concern, and the reason I ask these questions as a point of reference, and I do think it's applicable for this vote, is because it sounds like, I mean, one could argue that all of these items are waiting for the damage to be done. And you know, Ed, you made a comment about, you know, there's no regard for the condition of the field with Gatsby Grounds. I might oppose that. The field looks beautiful, and I think that in their mind, their job is to keep it to look that way, not to wait for it to get worse and then come in and do damage control. And I feel like this is what that might be doing. I'm in total, you know, agreement of having these conversations and to the recommendations that Emily and Ed are making. But at the point where we don't have enough information to know that it wouldn't become the town common, I would strongly oppose this just as you know, as a matter of it being a safe ball field. And you know, the fact that we do have a ton of volunteers that they've helped make it look so beautiful, it would be wonderful to make sure we can keep it that way.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification? One, I'm not sure who said, I certainly did not state Gatsby Ground has no regard because they are a company that has a purpose. They're trying to improve the fields for the purpose that's directed to them. But my question is, when you're talking about opposing, I'm looking through this O&M that's been drafted by Parks and Rec with input from some various parties. And it looks like it's talking about still the use of fertilizer, and it's still talking about weed control. It's not solely restricting it to hand pulling, but rather stating that would be the preferred method when there's not many to be addressed in terms of weeds. And then spot treatment is something that Ed mentioned as well. And then when something is removed, to make sure that it's loaned and seeded so that it doesn't give an opportunity for these opportunistic weeds to then grow in its place. And so I guess the question I have for you is, can you clarify what you're opposed to within this current proposed O&M plan? So just so that the commission can focus on that item.
Yeah, so I took a quick picture, so I'm just looking, I want to make sure I'm reading this right, because I don't, for some reason, I can't, I'm still seeing, I don't know if I'm seeing this the right screen, but I just saw it, something around that, so maybe Ed, you commented that it might be necessary to kill grubs. I guess I want to clarify, will we be able to fertilize, or are we choosing our words so carefully that we're going to pull weeds until someone deems it necessary, that it's gotten bad enough that we can now go forward and say we may now spray fertilizer? Or can we spray fertilizer in those areas that aren't, you know, the WRA, the wetland resource area, on our own ongoing basis before it gets to a certain threshold that would be deemed unacceptable? So maybe it's on me to clarify that before we move forward.
Could I answer Vince for a minute?
Yeah.
Vince, I just want to say, I did send an email to Pete about a week ago with all of these suggestions, and I was looking for input before then working with Ed on it, because I do fully appreciate the fact that we're teaming with Bolton Youth Baseball on these amendments. The purpose, I suppose, the way to put it, is not to take away from the aesthetics and the functionality of the field. It's just to try to reduce the amount of chemicals that are being used. When I talked to Gatsby Grounds regarding Memorial Field in Forbush, it seemed that it's just kind of a baseline chemical that's spread routinely. And I asked them about soil testing and they said, well, the state requires soil testing every 2 years, but it seems like the last time we did soil testing Memorial was in 2018. So I guess this is just kind of a checks and balances to say, okay, let's perform a soil test. I believe Gatsby would do it. They may not include it yearly, but what's the cost delta to do it yearly? Does that then offset costs for unnecessary fertilizing that you can now not do? So it's just kind of a, do we need this before we put it down, especially with our wetland resource areas around the field. This is not to say that the baseball field, we should wait until it looks terrible and then start, going crazy. The town common you brought up, I agree. I was there last week. It is not looking good, but in conversations with various community members, I learned that there's a really thin layer of soil there, and most of it was brought in as topsoil, or if not all of it, and underneath is a gravel layer. So the grass in general is not going to be as healthy at the town common. There also is an irrigation system, so if it's drying out a lot. There's a really nice soil base at the Memorial Field, and it may be because of the wetlands in the area, I don't know, but it's a really healthy soil and the grass is beautiful. And I talked to Eddie at DPW last week when I was there, and he had said, yeah, it's a really healthy field. And then he mentioned too, that every time the fertilizer is applied, the grass just grows faster, requiring more cuttings. And I guess my whole point here is that, we're just looking for ways that we could potentially reduce the amount of chemicals being spread, especially since every time an herbicide or a pesticide is put down, it's actually ruining the health of the soil, which then in turn, it affects the health of the grass, requiring more fertilizer. So it's kind of this vicious cycle. And then the grub control, the only point of the grub control was that one of the big signs of a grub issue is, dead patches of grass, which we're not seeing at Memorial Field. So my suggestion was, could we do a couple of square foot soil tests prior to applying the chemical? And maybe that's a question for Gatsby. Is that just something that they do routinely every spring? Or could they, do they ever come out and just test the soil before applying it? And if it's not needed, then you're saving $800 or $1,000 on the, application of grub control. So these are kind of wish list items, I would say, in an effort to reduce chemicals, but especially not to take away from, the importance of the field's conditions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Emily. Like I really, that it helps that background. I guess where my antenna went up was certainly around the grub, because unfortunately I personally know more about grubs than I ever wanted to from last year. And I know that they don't restrict themselves to like one little area. So if we have a grub issue at the fields, again, I'm not an expert by any means, only the personal research that I've done. It's safe to say that we're gonna have more than one dead spot. And by then it's too late, right? Then we're redoing the fields. And I think that's the importance of, that's why you would put it down ahead of time, so you never have that issue. Once you have that issue, it becomes a much bigger issue, right? So that's, I guess, is more of a concern, just because if we have that issue, it could be more of a long-term problem for us.
Mike Gore from Bolton Youth Baseball, if I could just add one more thing to that. I agree that the fields do look, great this season. One thing to keep in mind though is those fields, while they were fertilized a few times last year, but also the fields were very underutilized compared to normal years because of COVID. So, this year, I know Bolton Youth Baseball and Softball has kind of a record number of kids that are participating. I think, parents were really looking to sign their kids up to do something to get them outside after COVID. And so we have, teams on that field, on all those fields, kind of every day, multiple times a day. And so, again, to Vince's point, I think we're in agreement. We want to treat the fields well, not apply chemicals if we don't have to. But I just want to stress the fact that these fields are going to take some abuse this season just because of the number of kids that are going to be running around on them doing stuff. So just, I'd like both commissions to kind of keep that in mind as we go through this.
Duly noted. Rebecca, anyone else in the public looking to make comment this evening?
Ryan, I
Richard
have-
Davis, Richard Davis is asking.
Yes.
Go ahead, Richard.
After the last meeting, I just did a quick Google search of schools, playing fields, and pesticides. And there's a lot of literature out there about many school districts have completely banned the use of any type of pesticides on their fields. So it might be worthwhile, for somebody to look into this. What does the Bolton School District do with regard to its playing fields? Is there a general consensus? Maybe we can get some help from the state on this point. But the unknown aspects of rolling around in any type of pesticide, whether it's a week after, it's been sprayed or 2 weeks later, it's something that always gives me a measure of concern. Another thing that has not come up when we talk about fertilizers, it's possible, I'm sure this Gatsby can do a pH test at various locations out in the field, and changing the pH just by putting pelletized lime on the field can make nutrients that are already in the soil available that are not available if the pH of the soil is wrong. So it's a less aggressive way of treating a field. I know a couple of times when I've spread lime on my property, it's just amazing how green the grass comes up in those locations. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to make comment this evening?
I don't see anyone. I think I would just like to follow up with that as a reminder to the public that the commission issues this document, or is being requested to issue this document, to provide basically an outline and guidance, so that going forward, this document can be handed to, whether it be Bolton Youth Baseball to contract someone out, regardless, it's being issued to Parks and Rec. And they are then responsible to be handing it off to whoever is managing or maintaining the property in that light. So the commission is providing guidance to the items that have been addressed regarding what they are going to encourage on the property within their jurisdiction, but also outside of their jurisdiction that may impact their direct jurisdiction, not to be confusing with that. So the commission, just like any other applicant, is not going to say exactly what they can and can't do down to the chemical being used, but rather talking about types of treatment. So spot treatments encourage over broad spectrum, or fertilizer being used on a case, or herbicide being used on a case-by-case basis, items related to that, where they're fairly general and they allow some flexibility for Parks and Rec to be able to authorize specific items under that category. But certainly, yes, the added proposed amendments are up to the commission to include or not in this document. And I think the items that have been brought up are very relevant, but I do just want to highlight that the commission does not manage these properties, but rather the areas within their jurisdiction they issue these documents to, just like any other applicant, to ensure compliance with the local bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act. And it is therefore the property owner, or manager, in this case, Parks and Recreation, to then ensure compliance by anyone who is working on behalf of them, just like any resident in town or just like any property owner in town. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Were there any other members of the public looking to comment? All right.
I see none.
After hearing the comments, members of the commission have strong feelings or additional questions or comments at this time.
I just want to make one more clarification, because I just
Please.
went back and read the note about the grub control. The test says should be, but it does not say must be. So again, like Rebecca said, it is just a suggestion. Everything on here is a suggestion, because as Rebecca had mentioned, we cannot mandate what's happening outside of the wetland resource areas. So I just wanted to make sure that the language in there was not specific, but a suggestion only. So it is.
It's a very good point. And usually we use the terms also when practicable, which you can stretch for lots of different ways. Other comments from members of the commission? All right. Are we under a time crunch with getting this particular document out? And the only reason I asked that, Rebecca, is would it be possible to add those amendments that Ed had sent along into a document that we can then vote on the full document, or any changes to wordings in the amendments at our next meeting? Or is that really will that throw off any timelines or Parks and Rec?
So I would probably defer that to Ed or Lisa. And if they want to further defer that to Bolton Youth Baseball, that is fine. I would like to note that basically the two options that the commission has at this time is to vote on this document, to issue, if they wish, a determination with the amendments as proposed and listing them as conditions as they're able to do under one of the determinations that they can issue, or they have the ability to, the commission has the ability to request that the applicant continues until the next public hearing, which will be May 4th, I believe. At that time, the commission would also be requesting Parks and Rec incorporate the amendments that were discussed and proposed this evening into this document directly. I think it's important to highlight that this document will be accompanied by the determination of applicability and should be accompanied by it going forward whenever it's handed off to any contracted party to ensure that they realize it is under the jurisdiction of the commission. So I think either way is feasible, but to Brian's point, it is really dependent upon your time restrictions.
So, Mr. Chairman, you have a copy in your email presently of the document as amended, if you wish to display it at all, post discussion. And I don't think we'd have anything more to add at this time from our standpoint. I think we've reached the limit of our competence, if you will. And
No, I think you're fine. And I don't have the ability to display it right now off my screen. I guess what I'm saying is I think I'd rather close this out in 2 weeks and put all that language into it so we can put it on screen, have the public see what the final document looks like. And it will give me a chance to look through the wording of those amendments, or anybody else to look through the wording of those amendments, other commission members. And then next time we'll have a full document that we can then just close out. I just don't know if that making you wait 2 weeks before we close out, if that messes up any of your other timelines or causes you any consternation or problems.
Not from Parks and Rec standpoint.
Can I speak to that for Bolton Youth Baseball? And
Please.
it's
Go ahead,
really,
please.
thanks, Mike Gort. Specifically regarding the hitting tunnel that we're asking for, that does have about a 3-week lead time on when we order it as opposed to when it can be here. So we start our season basically in a week, and it's already kind of affecting us that we don't have, we had to take the existing hitting tunnel down. So I would just ask if the commission could possibly vote on that separately, and just allow us to move forward with that, because I think as soon as we have your permission on that, we'll contact the vendor and kind of get the process rolling with that.
Rebecca, do you think that is something that we could carve out and kind of do as a roll call vote? I know it's a tough.
I would suggest not taking a vote. What I can sort of say on not taking a vote separately, what I can certainly say is because it is replacing existing infrastructure and again, pulling it away, or rather widening away from the resource area, the commission has the discretion to allow at the discretion of Bolton Youth or Parks and Rec as the applicant. So if they want to take on that risk as well, for Bolton Youth Baseball to install that. That's really all I will say on the matter. However, it is not formally under the approval and in compliance until the determination is issued. And the reason why the determination needs to be issued is because it had expired. And every 3 years it needs to be redone, basically, to incorporate things like this. So that is what I will say to the commission. I will not be able to suggest whether the commission should allow at their discretion or not, but rather just make that statement so that the commission can make their choice. But I would 100% not suggest to the commission that they were to vote on 2 items separately under the same determination without issuing that determination.
Which leaves us.
Sorry.
Okay. So, am I understanding that you're saying that basically Parks and Rec could give Bolton Youth Baseball the okay to move forward based upon that, you know, we've had a public meeting in which it's been discussed and they have an idea of our thoughts on it. All right. In which case, Bolton Youth Baseball and Parks and Rec, does that make sense to you? Even if we're not able to close this out this evening, you could kind of make the decision on your own to move forward with that, knowing that we did discuss it publicly and that you have the support of the commission, if not yet a finalized document.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems sensible. It's been brought out in the public and I think it helps everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, I realize we want to, you know, dot our I's and cross our T's, and just from our perspective, you know, this is several $1,000s that we'll have to put out. And so, and I think we're all in agreement. The project, I don't think is, you know, is controversial in any way. And it seems like we have the support of both of you. So, I mean, I would be comfortable moving forward with it, you know, as long as you both feel that that's
Okay.
acceptable.
Should it be staked out first and just have Rebecca look at it just as a, okay? So we know exactly where, everyone knows where it's going. And just have, you know, Rebecca look at it quickly and say, yep, that looks good.
I was going to say, Lori, yes, when a determination is issued, that's typically a condition that's added into that determination.
We're just giving them the opportunity to order it.
Right.
It has a 3-week lead time. They're not installing it tomorrow. They're just
Right.
Correct. Yeah, it would be probably realistically a month before we installed it, most likely.
Okay.
there would be opportunity to stake it out. It's
stake it out
going
that
where the old one was anyway in the existing footprint, right? But this is just we're releasing it for fabrication, basically. They're not installing it tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
And they're not installing it before May 4th.
We would have a chance to close out. Yeah.
Yeah, I like I said, I believe it's 3 weeks before we could actually get it delivered to us. And then we would have to kind of coordinate either volunteer labor or, at a minimum, we'll need to do sod cutting where we widen it, and then see how level the area is in relation to the existing. So there will be some prep work done before it gets installed, but yeah.
So it sounds like, Mr. Chair, then you are comfortable with Bolton Youth Baseball ordering it, again, subject to Parks and Rec's discretion. And that's all the commission needs to say about that, because unless they're taking a vote, but I would strongly say not to, and then requesting a continuation until the next meeting.
That is correct. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. As long as we're not holding anything up, and if you're okay, Ed, I'd like to continue it to the next meeting again, just so we can add everything onto one document, have everybody look at the document, and just close it out that
I
way
understand.
without adding on the other condition. Okay.
Yep, I
All right.
understand.
So in that case, I would like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Memorial Field until our next public meeting, Tuesday, May 4th at 7 p.m.
Yep.
Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of continuing, starting with Lori,
Aye.
Emily?
I can vote on this, right? On the continue?
No,
No,
You have to
abstain.
abstain.
you're abstaining. All right, Bill
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so Ed, if you can just send me the amended version of the O and M with what we talked about this evening
I shall.
before the Thursday prior to the meeting, that would be great.
All right.
And then I already have the information for the tunnel, so that will just be incorporated in the decision hopefully issued at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Rebecca, are you ready for me to continue?
Yes.
Okay, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now hear an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, for 159 Ballville Road, the International / Oaks Golf Course.
We do have the applicant's representative present. I believe I have unmuted. Oh, there's a few of you.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's 3 of us.
Okay,
So Paul McManus, Steve Brennan, and myself.
thank you. And do you just want to introduce each aspect that you're representing?
Sure. My name is Kelly Durfee Cardoza. I'm here tonight to represent Escalante, the International, and I have with me Steve Brennan. Steve is the general manager of the International, and Paul McManus is with Ecotech in Worcester, and he's flagged the wetlands. So we're here tonight to present the abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for the Oaks Golf Course, which is about 250 acres of the site. And as you said, the filing is made under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Bolton Wetlands Bylaw. As you know, the International has been closed since last March. Initially, it was due to COVID and then ultimately to a bankruptcy. And Escalante purchased the property on February 10th. Their plan is to operate as a golf-centric members club. So there'll be somewhat less activity at the site than there was under the former owners. They're not proposing to host weddings and the functions that were held at the International previously. So over the last several years, there's been an awful lot of deferred maintenance to the buildings, but also to the golf course. So the International staff has spent the last couple of months making repairs to and refreshing the fireplace room, the pro shop, upgrading the infrastructure, and replacing the sand in the bunkers in the Pines golf course. That's the oldest of the 2 golf courses. And then that one opened to the public, or opened to the members last week. The ultimate plan for this Pines course is that it will close and undergo a significant renovation over the next couple of years. So the idea is to get the Pines open and have them be able to play. Meanwhile, the Oaks Golf Course, which was constructed in 2000, so it's about 20 years old, is located both in the towns of Bolton and Lancaster. And in 1999, we came before this board with an ANRAD, but also with an order of resource area delineation was issued. And then once we knew how the golf course construction was going to look, an order of conditions was filed for the construction, was issued, sorry, for the construction of the golf course, the features, the cart paths, and the bridges. And that was in November of 1999. So we're not proposing at this point in time to make any sweeping changes on the Oaks Golf Course. The new owners are proposing to start maintenance and some limited renovations. And so the wetlands were flagged so that they have an understanding of where the jurisdictional areas are. Their current plan is to re-level the existing tees. It was actually interesting to hear your discussion about the conditions of the turf fields, because some of the turf here on the Oaks course needs to be maintained. So they'll re-level the existing tees. They'll restore the waste bunkers, which haven't been maintained for a couple of years. They'll re-edge some of the existing bunkers and add a couple of forward tees. But all of that work is within the footprint of the existing golf course and outside of the jurisdictional areas under both the act and the bylaw that Paul had flagged over the last several weeks. So I'd just like to ask Paul to describe the process and what he found. And this plan that's on your screen right now is the set that you received were cut into 40 scales, which is required under your bylaw. This is just one at 200 scale, so we can kind of see all the wetlands together.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Again, Paul McManus, professional wetland scientist from Ecotech in Worcester. 20 years ago, I was the one that delineated all these wetlands myself. This time I had some substantial help, but found all the same wetlands. We delineated these wetlands, myself and 3 associates from my office, all of whom have 20+ years experience. We delineated the wetlands based upon presence of predominance of wetland vegetation, as well as indicators of hydrology. In some instances, not so much on this part of the property, but in other parts of the property where the older golf courses are, we had wetlands extending out into turf areas where the vegetation was altered and relied just on the indicators of hydrology. In this instance, though, as Kelly said, this golf course is only 20 years old and was essentially designed around the wetlands. So we have, for the most part, these wetlands are in the woods. So just briefly, I'll run through what we have. Kelly, if you can point to the area over by Ballville Road.
Rebecca.
So
that's Rebecca.
Paul, just a point of reference. So I'm driving the screen, but also can you just provide a quick point of clarification? When you talk about using wetland vegetation and hydrology, you're also, of course, incorporating hydric soils under that hydrology statement, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. That's I could have been more clear about that. When we talk about indicators of hydrology, the primary one that we're looking at is hydric soils. In very limited instances, including the first area that I'm going to ask Rebecca to point to over on the right here, there was an area down at the lower tip of that wetland where we actually lacked hydric soils, but there was some evidence of surface flow, so I included that. So that area that Rebecca's highlighting is pretty interesting. There's a small stream that flows under the road onto the site. When we were there in last week in March, first week in April, there was some flow coming through culvert there, very, very discernible flow goes down, and that stream, we use the term goes blind. And by that we mean there's visible flow as you walk downstream, you see less and less flow, and well before you get about to the point where Rebecca's cursor is, then there was no flow. We still had wetland vegetation, we still had indicators of hydrology downstream, which would be lower left in this image, right? And right at that point there, thank you, that's where we lost those indicators. So again, we had no flow. There is evidence that during very high flow, be frost conditions in a spring melt perhaps, where water does come across there. But that was the limit of where we had those features. So that appears to be, if you look at it, you might think that was an isolated wetland. It's not. It is actually a bordering vegetative wetland. There is an internal stream that does go blind. So that's a BVW area. Most of what we have, but not all, is bordering vegetative wetland. So if we can move on, Rebecca. And I will say that I looked at the old plans. This area looks a lot like it did when I flagged it 20 years ago. It's actually extended downstream a little bit from what I had initially flagged in that area, correct? So to the left of the screen, on the screen is a little isolated vegetative wetland which is, it's actually formed in an old mined area. There's just a topographic depression there where they mine down such that water gets down there, perhaps gets close to the water table. But that's a little isolated vegetative wetland. It's not state jurisdictional, but it is jurisdictional under your bylaw.
Could you just describe very briefly the process that you reviewed it to ensure that it's jurisdictional under our bylaw?
Basically, it has a predominance of wetland vegetation in there. There's some red maples. There's wetland shrubs. I'd have to check my notes to be sure. But as I recall, there's some hotbush blueberry and arrowwood down in there. There's some remnant wetland ferns, as I recall, cinnamon fern and sensitive fern. So we have a predominance of wetland vegetation, and we also have within that narrow finger there, we also do have hydric soils. There's very limited evidence of ponding. I think it's it may pond very briefly, but certainly not enough to function as vernal pool habitat or anything like that. But it does have the vegetation and the hydrology, and even though its history is clearly the result of mining back many decades ago, it's been there long enough that it's developed those characteristics. So
Thank you.
We felt it needed to be flagged. Further left. This
We're going
area
south on this.
Well, actually, if go north just a little bit, that area, that kind of egg-shaped area that's right in the middle, that's an area that we flagged when we were out there. Scott Morrison in my office, who flagged that, was pretty sure that he was standing in a constructed stormwater basin, but wasn't quite certain. So to be conservative, put up flags at the bottom of it. This is a 200 scale plan, so the topography's been lifted, but that's a very obviously excavated basin that was constructed for stormwater. You'll notice that these plans show buffers around most of the wetland, most of the flagged areas. This one does not. It's our opinion that this is not a jurisdictional resource. But again, it's low, it's wet, it's got wetland vegetation in it, but it's clearly and Kelly can speak and document that if you'd like, speak to the history of that area.
I think maybe if the commission wishes to conduct a site visit, she could express the history of the area at that point, I guess. And I apologize, I'm zooming in to just make sure we get the flagging reference. I guess if you could just highlight possibly how you typically approach these areas that are, as you're saying, to you and to the property owner, man-made and not requiring a buffer, if it does in fact have these characteristics that you're reviewing the other wetland resource areas by, and sort of just briefly summarize why you wouldn't associate with this a buffer and why it wouldn't be jurisdictional, even though it was originally created for, or possibly created for, stormwater infrastructure purposes.
I can
Sure.
confirm that it was created for stormwater. It was part of this project.
Okay, thank you. So I guess what I'm asking Paul to clarify, or rather just express for the commission's purposes and understanding the delineation of it, is specific to the regulations and why that isn't tied in both to our bylaw and then the Wetlands Protection Act, just so that the commission understands why this would not be viewed as jurisdictional, even though it may carry the same characteristics as, for instance, another wetland resource area that we already looked at.
Right, sure. So put, I think most simply is, this area looks like a wetland, why am I saying it's not one? And the basic reason is that the regulations call out for stormwater management features that would, I don't have the citation open in front of me, but basically stormwater management features that were constructed in the modern era do not themselves create wetlands jurisdiction. And I can provide chapter and verse to that. Again, I don't have it right in front of me, but the regulations, these state regs are clear on that. And your bylaw in terms of these definitions defers to the state regs. So that's my view. And if the commission would like, again, I can provide the regulatory citation.
I think that would be helpful as a follow-up, Paul, but we can certainly continue to move through this delineation.
Okay, we can do that. So then if you maybe zoom out and go south a little bit. Keep going. Okay, thank you. So the red here is the southern property line. Thanks. So this is an area of bordering vegetative wetland that flows from off-site wetland. You can see the flag series. The one on the right, I extended, went a little bit far afield. And the hydrology is that there's an intermittent stream that flows down the middle of this feature, flows from south to north, which is bottom to top in this figure. So this is a wooded swamp, red maple swamp. It's got some areas in the center that are kind of, this time of year are shallow ponding through there. You can see just a little bit above Rebecca's cursor at the narrow point. That's where your predecessor commission approved one of several cart path crossings over here. You'll see those on the site visit. But basically, this is a wooded area with the BVW going down through the woods, and both sides again, wooded swamp, and then the upland community is a pretty typical pine oak forest. A lot of low bush blueberry, huckleberry, that sort of thing in the understory, and again, red and white oak, and mostly white pine in the overstory. So if we can slide up along the same system. Thanks. There's another cart path bridge kind of right in the middle of the screen there. And then towards the top of the screen, you'll see we get into some odd features. Whoop. Shift a little bit to the right. Thank you. At this point, these odd features are you'll see where the surveyors put the word connection. Those are culvert pipes that transmit flow again up on the page to the north. And these are old man-made features back from the initial Pines golf course that goes back many decades. So for some length here along the wetland is in a highly altered condition through this area, because again, you can see just below that upper little bubble there, you'll see the tree line. So we're getting out into the we've left the woods and getting out into the open golf course at this point. So we use the same delineation criteria, except that, again, as I said initially, when we get into areas where the vegetation is altered by golf course maintenance, then we rely just on indicators of hydrology, primarily the hydric soils, because obviously where the golf course maintains the vegetation, you don't have that plant community, so you just look to just the hydrology indicator. So if we can keep
one question as I'm moving north here. for these connection points, can you just clarify that these are in fact culverts under the ground, or are these like bioswale connection points? And bioswale isn't the correct term, I apologize, but sort of an open top connection.
No, these are culverts. You'll see our flag series end.
Yep.
If you look, for example, in the upper left of this figure, we have a flagged area that's pretty narrow. That's an open, pretty well-defined open swale. But there was something there to flag, so we flagged it. But we did want the surveyor to show these connections. They are technically they're part of the stream, part of the intermittent stream that runs through here. The flagging here is pretty complicated, but I think they did a pretty good job of laying it on the plan and showing the connections. And when you go out and see it, it will make more sense out there. Because this is a long kind of convoluted system that runs all the way through the property. So we can keep going, keep flowing downstream, Rebecca, if you would. So at this point, you'll see Kelly talked about the fact that there's the 2 golf courses over here, and we're only dealing on the ANRAD. We're only dealing with the Oaks course. I have to keep remembering which one's which. So you'll see that we have the connection line there that's shown, and then there's a reg line, right? There's a reg line here that's the limit of the ANRAD. So the wetland obviously continues down that, and that area up there in the cursor is a pond that's certainly jurisdictional, but it's outside of what we're seeking the commission's review. And then the water flows from that pond into the one that's now upper left. And at this point, you'll see we've added another color to the plan, and that other color is mean annual high water flagging for riverfront. And from this point down, there is a mapped. The stream system becomes mapped by USGS as a perennial stream. So it's a presumed river. So we delineated from this point to the downstream property line. We delineated the mean annual high water, and we add riverfront area from this point down. I think it's very possible that this is not in fact a perennial stream. Back 20 years ago, we were able to overcome the perennial presumption, and your predecessor commission found it was an intermittent stream. But at this point, it's a presumed river. So that's the flagging that we did.
As part of this ANRAD, you're not requesting to contest that at this point, correct?
That's correct. Right.
Okay.
We're asking for the mean annual high water. We'll obviously keep an eye on it, and if it does in fact turn out that it's that it goes dry and we're not in a drought situation like we were last summer, then we'll collect that documentation and potentially seek to amend the ORAD that we're asking for. But at this point, we don't have any such information to put on the table.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
So where am I going from here?
I think kind of upper left, if I get my bearings. Yeah, there we go. Oh. Okay, so again, we have on the right of this image, we have more area that's part of the same system. You'll see two small ponds that are really part of the same series. And then we get back onto the Oaks course, and you can see pretty clearly on this image, we have a continuous thread of the perennial stream. and right, that, which is the purple, and then a kind of a varying width area of BVW along it. We have that little pond off on the side. I will say that some of these flags where we have, we have these kind of ponds interspersed in the middle. We've delineated the outer resource area, which in many cases is BVW. In some cases is actually the bank of the pond. Some of these ponds on the, particularly on the older Pines course, have highly altered banks, stacked block banks, vertical face. That's the transition from wetland to upland. And then, so this continues off to the left, Rebecca, if you would.
Before we move on, can you just provide clarification on why these ponds don't have associated flagging?
Because they're outside the limits of the area that we're requesting the ORAD for.
Okay.
So we
that's
did
fine.
do that. We did do that flagging.
I see. Okay, I'm seeing that red line now again, right? This is
Yeah,
here,
it's a
if
little,
I'm following.
it's a little subtle at this scale,
Yeah.
but yeah. So we did continuous flagging all through there.
Yep.
And it's all been surveyed. It's all on the plan. But rather than we thought this was confusing enough, frankly, with all these flags. But rather than put flags on and some will say, well, we're not asking you to look at those flags. So in this way, only the flags that are kind of on the table for the ANRAD are on the plan. But you're absolutely right. The system clearly does continue through.
Okay, and the additional purpose of that is at this time, the general manager or the consultant is just solely looking at potentially work in the future related to the Oaks course, which is why you're looking for an ANRAD on this and not including those at this time. Because, and the reason I say that is just a discretionary note that if you're proposing to do work there in the jurisdiction of the commission, they'd have to do an ANRAD for that as well.
Oh yeah, no, that's
clarification.
Kelly's beat that into them pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Kelly. Okay.
So I think we're getting close to the downstream property line here. A little bit further. Here we go. Yep. So again, obviously this system, continues downstream off site, but we stopped, I guess, pretty close to the property line there. So that's the real Cliff Notes version of kind of what's out there and what we did. Again, this area is, we're back in the woods down here. Unfortunately, a ton of invasives on this part of the property. The upper part, where we first started our tour, the upper part of this system is really a nice, relatively natural woodland up there. Down here, we've got a ton of invasives in here, but again, flagged it, by kind of conventional soils and vegetation. And then I think we covered everything, didn't we, Kelly? Did I miss anything?
Nope. I think that's fine.
Yeah. So happy to go into as much detail as the commission would like, but obviously this is something that needs to be seen on the ground.
Yeah, I'll open it up to other commission members to see if they have any initial comments or thoughts, but I have that same thought, just to go ahead and let's schedule a site visit, get out there and see if we can agree with all these flaggings. But I appreciate the maps you've submitted tonight, and it looks like a fun project to get out there and walk. But I have no initial questions based off this. Any other commission members that have any initial comments or thoughts based on what we've seen tonight?
No comments or questions, with exception to, I am very excited about the site visit for this. Beautiful property. So
Put on your walking shoes.
one of our best site
It's
visits.
gonna
So
be
there.
Any members of the public here tonight to comment or have any questions on this?
Again, just a reminder, if individuals from the public are present for this particular topic, you can use the raise hand function or the chat function. But I am seeing none.
I'm not seeing any. Okay. That's it. With the applicant's permission, we'll go ahead and continue this until our next meeting. And in the interim, we'll try to get out there for a site visit and actually walk it and see if we don't agree with all the flagging. But is it okay with you if we continue until our next meeting?
Of course.
Yes, actually, what I had said to Rebecca is if we're going to go ahead and do a site visit, would it be possible to go ahead and try and schedule that and see if we can publish that as a public hearing, and then you could actually vote when you're out there? Assuming that you have a quorum. We're prepared for the public to attend if that's, if someone from the public wants to attend, they'd certainly be welcome. The club has pretty strict COVID regulations. People would need to wear masks and such. And then the easiest way to look at this, there'll be some walking, but the easiest way to look at this is for at least portions of it to take golf carts. We go to, and I think we'd probably start just the way Paul did, and move across the golf course in that way, go through the Oaks course, and then stop the carts, walk out to what we needed to see. We'll be able to look at those culverts where they come in and out of the ponds, et cetera. And then go through the woods and look at the wetlands where we need to.
I appreciate your willingness to do it, but I think currently under the governor's orders, we're not allowed to have members of the public in person at our meetings, and it doesn't say indoor or outdoor. It just says no public, no members of the public will be permitted to attend the meeting, and that they can only participate via Zoom or conference call. And that's the only reason why I would hesitate. I'd want it to be open to a public meeting, so if they had any comments and or questions before we closed it out. I wouldn't mind doing it in the field. It's not something we've really done before, and I don't want to get into the habit. But the one reason I would say no in this case is I don't think we're allowed to have members of the public there. So I would want to close this out at a public hearing where people could actually comment.
Brian, I understand where you're coming from. I would have to confirm with the town clerk or the town administrator just to ensure that I'm up to date on the most current, I'm not going to say most current status of that, but I believe it is in fact the same. And the reason why I would want to look is to see if it requires it or if it gives it to the board to decide. But I agree with you that this is the way the town has been conducting business. And we want to ensure that we're treating every project fairly, specifically in light of the pandemic as well. So I do appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, I would ask Kelly, is there a specific time constraint that you're under?
No, what they're proposing to do is to work outside of these areas, and we broadly, first of all, this is all golf course. It was all maintained essentially every day anyway. But anything that was more extensive than simply taking the sand out of the bunkers and replacing it, we've asked them to wait until you've had a chance to go ahead and walk this. So they're proposing to start work next week on the 26th, and they have work interior to the golf course outside of these wetland areas that they can work in. When were you thinking that you could do, because so your next meeting would be May
4th.
May 4th.
Yeah. And I can't speak for other commission members, but my schedule is flexible enough that within the next 2 weeks, I should be able to get out there if we have a few different days available.
So would you anticipate having everyone come at one time, or do, the only thing is that it's a fairly large property, and I really think you would need to be accompanied. We'd need to have someone go with you to look at this. provide golf carts and then give people access to the site.
So what we typically do, just as an example, is there are times, because it is on the commission schedule, what we try to do is offer immediately following the meeting. I reach out to the commission and say the applicant has stated these dates or these days of the week are preferred during these times, give them a few opportunities, or if you would like to leave it up completely to the commission, I say, here's a few dates and times I'm going to be available, and the commission may be available as well. The commission will confirm it. And at times it is split in two general timeframes. Sometimes it's one morning time, one afternoon. Sometimes the commission is available all together, and that's what we obviously prefer. But again, it's at the commission's availability. They all have families and individual lifestyles as well. We prioritize them to be out on site all together. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes a commission member can't make it out at all. And so to that note, I think to answer your question is we will be pushing and prioritizing to have everyone there at one time for the reasons you've stated, but also acknowledging the fact that it may actually break into 2 time periods because of the commission's availability. Does that make sense?
That's fine. Just so long as, I just want to make sure that we have, Paul there to look at the wetlands, to, really go through the line, and availability of us to accompany you. That's all.
Sure. And is there a day of the week or a time that you would like the commission to either try for or to absolutely stay away from, where there's zero availability over the course of the next 2 weeks?
No, I mean, I would say I would like to be there myself. I did probably more of this than anybody in my office, but
sure,
if you pick a time, that I can't make, which is limited in the next 2 weeks, I'm pretty flexible. Then I'll get somebody knowledgeable to pinch hit. So my only commitment is Tuesday the 27th. I have a Sturbridge Concom site walk at a time to be determined. But other than that, I think everything that I have, I could push around for this, because I totally understand your you're trying to squeeze this unpaid job into the rest of your lives. So we'll accommodate.
And I just want, excuse me, Steve, is there any date that doesn't work for you at the club for a particular reason?
No, we can be flexible for sure.
Okay. Then I think we leave it to the commission.
Wonderful, thank you. So what I will end up doing, unless someone knows off the top of their head now when they're absolutely not available over the course of the next 2 weeks, so we can note it, I will be sending out an email first thing in the morning. So if you could respond as quickly and efficiently as possible so that we can get this scheduled, I would appreciate it. And then I will certainly relay that date and time, preferably if we can give them 2 options, that would be good. And then, of course, Paul as well and Steve would be copied on that to ensure that the appropriate parties are available. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep, that's great. Kelly, do we want to talk, since everybody's here, do we want to talk about logistics for when this gets scheduled, where people should meet?
Yes. So why don't we have you park in, Steve, do you mind if we put the carts in front of the old clubhouse?
No, it's fine because it'll be separate, which that works. And that's the starting point anyway, as
Right,
Paul was saying.
so when you drive into the main entrance, there'll be a parking lot kind of to your left. You'll go straight in, and then you'll see kind of a flat looking building with a porte cochere in the front. It's the old clubhouse, and then there's parking to the left. And then we'll just put carts there, and we can meet right there. And then also, Rebecca, I'll give you my cell phone because it's a big property. And then if anyone somehow doesn't find us, they'll have my cell phone number. So I'll just email that to you.
Sure, if you could follow up with that this evening or first thing tomorrow, that would be helpful. And if you could actually send a map of the property that shows where the parking or where you're suggesting we start, that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, it's actually on your plans that we're looking at here. So go a little bit to the right and then go a little bit up. And you can see where you're going to come in off of Ballville Road.
Yep.
And then you're going to come to the left, kind of through that parking lot area. And the old clubhouse is, nope, that's the fireplace room. Come.
This one?
Nope, lower. It's that one. Yes.
Okay. So if you could just put a giant like P or highlight wherever you want us to park in there, because I'm already looking at this going, I've honestly only been there once to that first building. So it would be helpful just to say, this is the exact parking branch. And I don't mean to be disrespectful at all by saying that, but there's a lot of access ways here, it seems. So if you could just highlight where you would like us to park and then where you would like us to meet and just send that when you send your contact information, I think that would be helpful. Then when the commission submits their availability, I can just forward that to them and there's me not sending incorrect information.
So, and don't worry about the number of parking lots, because when the new owners came to look at it, they felt like it was Disneyland.
There you go.
Because there's so many parking lots, so.
There you go. Okay. So Brian, it sounds like we have our action items going forward. Would you like to make a formal motion about the continuation?
I will. Well, I would say, do we have permission from the applicants to continue until our next meeting?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the hearing for abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for 159 Ballville Road till our next public hearing, Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 at 7:15 p.m. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca. I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we will be in contact.
All right, look forward to seeing you out there.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kelly. And
Good.
Steve as well.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Rebecca, are you ready for me to continue?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent filed for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, regarding the proposed construction of 3 single-family homes, the widening and paving of an existing gravel driveway. Rebecca, I was going to ask if you have an update, but it looks like the applicant has requested a continuance.
They have not yet provided the information that the commission asked, but they've stated they're working on it to be able to provide it and have asked when the next meeting dates are and have therefore requested continuation until the next meeting in hopes that they will submit in time.
Okay. I know we can't take public comment, but any members of the commission have any questions or thoughts? All right, hearing none, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for a notice of intent for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75. So our next public hearing, Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m.
I second.
All those in favor, starting with Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you. We have done
I think we got through most.
everything. Oh, Five Share Dam Conservation Area, there is, I have to double check to see if our wonderful Trails Committee member installed it yet. But there is or will soon be a new QR code self-guided walk that guides you through a few different loops of different lengths through the Five Share Dam Conservation Area, including the connection to Berlin through the Wendler property, or I believe it is the Peach Hill Conservation Area once you cross over into Berlin, and then up to Peach Hill Road as well by Shartner and guiding you down to Sawyer Road and Haynes Wheeler property. So go explore if you have not already. I have the next round of Operation Maintenance Plan drafts that I will send out again, and those, again, we're going to be following the same process where we will review, and then if the commission has any edits to make, we will consider them, include them, and then conditionally approve to be posted to the website. I have not received any comments on the ones that have already been posted. And so that's encouraging, but at the same time, if members of the public wish to make comments, they can email me directly with those comments that I will then incorporate or suggest to the commission to incorporate. I believe we touched upon everything else, unless I'm mistaken.
I think so.
Okay. So that is what I have for this evening.
That is excellent. That is a nice full slate. Do any members of the commission have any new business or anything else they would like to discuss this evening?
I have one thing to just say, and I did post some information on Facebook about this. There is some new regulations the state is putting out for mosquito control, and I'm bringing this up because on the mass.gov website they have opened it to public comment. It's called their Mosquito Control for the 21st Century Task Force. And to date, they have not received a lot of public comment. So I believe they're closing it early May to comment. So if anybody has anything they want to add or question on the proposals being made for adjusting the program, now's your time.
Thank you.
No. Any other new business? All right, hearing none. I would like to make a motion that we hereby adjourn the Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Lori.
Aye.
Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am an aye as well. Thank you for everything. We'll
Wonderful.
see you in 2 weeks, if not before.
Yes, well, it will be before. We have a site
Yeah,
visit.
That's going to
we'll
be
see
the
you out
first
at the
thing
Oaks. We'll see you
ever.
out on the golf course.
Yes, please check your emails tomorrow in the morning, probably around like 9:30, 10 o'clock. If you have time, I would appreciate it so that we can schedule that and work with them on their time frame as well.
Okay.
Thank you and
Yeah.
have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, take care, everyone.